Welcome back to Court TV Live. Thank you so much for following along with us this afternoon. We're on a verdict watch in the school shooter dad trial for James Crumbley. The jury there has been deliberating Crumbley's fate for about 4.5 hours at this point. We're going to take you back into that courtroom if there's a question or a verdict. But let's return now to major testimony happening in Idaho. The defendant is Daniel Howard. He's accused of murdering his wife, Kendi. He says it was a suicide. She was found dead in a bathtub back in February of 2021 with a gunshot wound inside of her mouth and head. But the state says that she was asphyxiated by this defendant and then that scene was staged. A pivotal witness on the stand right now, Dr. John Howard. He performed the initial autopsy on Kendi, and he has something different than the state to say about the opinion. Let's go back into court.
The state and the medical examiner's office.
Well, medical examiners have jurisdiction over sudden, unnatural, unexpected, unexplained deaths. Same as a coroner, medical examiners just have a medical training, medical degree. In this case, this was a coroner case, a Kootenai County coroner case. Spokane County and Kootenai County have long had a inter-county arrangement where the coroner can refer cases into autopsy to Spokane, where those autopsies are performed by a forensic pathologist. Spokane County does that for a number of Panhandle counties and a number of eastern Washington counties.
Did you, can you explain the general process of an autopsy?
Certainly. The term autopsy literally means to see for oneself. It's for the pathologist to examine the body of the deceased to help determine who they are, when and where events happened and processes happened that led to their death, to help determine whether they have any natural disease, any developmental abnormalities, any kind of injury, to help formulate cause of death opinions or identify the cause of death and develop information that helps understand the circumstances in which or the manner in which the death occurred.
What happens after an autopsy is complete?
Well, during the autopsy, there are documentations made. Radiographs or x-rays are taken. Photographs are taken at various stages during the autopsy procedure. Samples are collected to submit for toxicology testing. Then some samples, biopsy tissue samples, are placed into fixative, formaldehyde water mixture to be held. Portions of tissues are processed into a glass slide that can be examined under a microscope. Once the examination is completed and all those samples, as well as trace evidence like hair samples, swabs, fingernail trimmings, once that's all been processed in the autopsy suite, the body is released to a funeral home.
Now, is the performance of, did you perform an autopsy on Miss Kendi Howard?
I did.
And when was that?
That was February 3rd of the year 2021.
Was law enforcement present for that autopsy?
I believe someone, the autopsy suite has observation rooms where law enforcement can observe through the window, yes.
Are photos taken at the time of the autopsy?
Yes, at various stages from the very start and subsequent multiple stages after the start.
May I approach Madam Clerk, Your Honor? Does law enforcement give you any information prior to the conducting an autopsy?
Well, this was a coroner case, so the coroner entered the case information into the computer system at the medical examiner's office, and that would certainly, since they were at the scene and working with law enforcement, include some of that information.
What is an external examination?
External examination means at the start of the autopsy, the body in a sealed body bag is on a cart wheeled into the autopsy suite. The tag is looked at to ensure that it hasn't been broken. It is then broken and the body bag's open, and the external examination, meaning just looking at the outer surface of the body, begins.
Is it important to do an external examination before an autopsy?
Well, it's at the very start before you alter the body in any way by making any surgical type incisions, yes.
Okay. Now, did you may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
May.
And Doctor, you said photos were photos taken at the autopsy?
Yes, either by myself or by the two autopsy assistants working with me under my direction.
Okay, so I'm going to run through a series of photos, and you can just tell me if you recognize them. This is 28.
All right?
This is 20M.
Yes?
This is 20M Zoom.
Yes.
This is 20R.
Yes.
This is 20W.
Yes.
And this is 20W Zoom.
Yes. Okay.
You recognize these?
Yes, they were photographs taken at the time of the autopsy.
All right, doctor, these have been admitted into evidence already. Is one of the things you look for is rigor?
Yes, the post-mortem changes. Rigor mortis is a stiffening of the muscles due to chemical changes occurring after death. So that is one of the things that you assess. It relates in general to how long the person's been dead.
Okay. And was rigor present in Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Now, what is lividity?
Lividity is the pooling of blood inside intact blood vessels after death under the force of gravity. So whatever position the body is in, when the heart stops, circulation stops, blood, which is a mixture of cells and fluid, behave like a fluid, and like any fluid, under gravity, seek to the lowest spot. Now, it will then show up as vascular congestion, which looks like a purple discoloration of the skin. It will not form where there's pressure, so like the buttocks, if someone's...
Narrative at this point, Judge?
You still explain to her.
Overruled. He's continuing to know what it is. You may continue.
So it doesn't tend to form where there's pressure, but whatever part is dependent, meaning the lowest by gravity, it'll start to show up. Now, it's not necessarily fixed in the first hours or necessarily the first day of death, after death, so it can shift if the body moves, but it's just a post-mortem appearance of discoloration of the skin from blood vessels, pooling of blood under gravity.
Was there blood present when you removed Ms. Howard from the bag, the sealed bag?
Yes, blood was pooled in the body bag and was on the body surface.
I'm showing you 20A. Is this, can we have the lights on? Can you see that photo?
If you need to step out into the well here.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome to.
I have seen the photo.
And can you see the hair there?
Yes.
And can you describe what you observed and what's shown in that photo?
The hair is wet and blood present throughout the scalp hair.
Now, in the, you do examine the head and neck?
Yes.
Okay. What is petechiae?
Petechiae are pinpoint hemorrhages that can be seen after death or even in a live patient when there's vascular compromise, meaning blood vessels, the veins are collapsed in an area, but there's still arterial pressure going to that area. The circulation of blood stops because of the occlusion of the veins, and small blood vessels rupture, producing a pinpoint hemorrhage. This is most commonly seen in strangulations where compression is put on the neck such that the veins of the neck are compressed and occluded. Blood cannot return back to the heart, but there's still arterial pressure to the head. At every point above where that pressure is applied, occluding the veins, are at risk of having those pinpoint hemorrhages seen. Most easily seen in the whites of the eyes because of the translucent tissue. If you look in your own eye, you can see blood vessels. That's where most commonly seen, but it can be seen anywhere in the face, the neck, or in the oral mucosa. In other cases of the same.
Object to narrative.
Overruled.
You can continue.
Similar cases where, say, someone's working in a trench and the trench collapses, their head and neck are above, and there's pressure on the chest, you may see petechiae all above that level. The other classic case is the backyard mechanic who jacks up his car, gets underneath, the jack fails, it comes down, it doesn't crush your chest.
Objection, non-responsive and narrative.
Overruled and non-responsive, but this is getting into narrative. This is quite far afield of your initial question, so I'll ask you to direct the testimony. Sustained.
Did you observe any petechiae, Ms. Howard?
No.
Were there any lines or markings going around her body?
Yes.
And can you describe that?
When a body is subjected to being submerged in water, at least partly, you can see where there's relative hydration of the skin, water markings, and there were lines of skin discoloration indicating where the water line was, with above that.
County medical examiner there, Dr. John Howard, saying that there was no petechiae. That's hemorrhaging or visible signs in the face, neck, sometimes in the eyes that someone has been asphyxiated or strangled. He said there's no evidence of that, and we expect his opinion is going to be that this appeared to be a death by gunshot wound. Let's quickly bring in National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, it's good to see you. Thanks for being on with us and sharing your time. Tell me how unusual it is for us to see a county medical examiner testifying for the defense and not the prosecution.
You know, when we were on a break, I called a local judge to ask him if he has seen that recently. He didn't answer my call, but he'll call me back later and I'll ask him, because I personally I haven't really seen it. I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time. I'm sure it has happened, but it's bizarre. It's bizarre in favor of the defense. I could imagine that the fact that the defendant is a state trooper, I have to imagine that has to do with it, because it's too much of a coincidence that a state actor is testifying in favor of a former state actor who was not acting in his official capacity when the situation happened with his wife. But I have to imagine that has something to do with it.
Right, and he could be protecting his reputation. He initially said suicide, and it's not until many months, years later, that they were able to build a case for this being a homicide instead. But we are going to hear on cross-examination by the state. We expect to hear that they're going to dig into why he retired, why he left the medical examiner's office. So we have all of that ahead to look forward to. Let's squeeze in a break, get you back inside of that courtroom in Idaho for more. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae. We are keeping our eyes on two courtrooms this afternoon. First in Michigan, the jury began their second day of deliberation in the fate of the school shooter dad trial. James Crumbley is the defendant. They've been at it for 4 hours and 47 minutes. As soon as we see any movement in that courtroom, a verdict, a question, we'll take you there live. Meanwhile, we are standing by for testimony to begin in another live trial that's happening in the state of Idaho. We're following the jealous ex-trooper murder trial. Defendant Daniel Howard is accused of murdering his wife, Kendi, who was found in a bathtub, dead back in February of 2021. He claims it was a suicide and she had a gunshot wound to the head through the mouth. But the state says he staged that scene. Let's get you back into the courtroom now. We have the former medical examiner, Dr. John Howard, still on the stand testifying for the defense.
There was submersion in water of the skin.
And you could see those, where in her body or on her body could you see those lines?
Well, there are a number of them, mostly most readily visible on the trunk.
Okay. Were they also on the legs?
Yes.
Now, did you observe any abrasions?
Yes.
Where was that?
There was an abrasion on the posterior or back of her left thumb.
Showing you what's been admitted as 20W. Is this a picture of the abrasion?
Yes, this is a photograph taken at the time of autopsy of her left thumb. If I may,
Sure.
I can point out the abrasion.
Sure.
So her thumbnail is here, so the back of the thumb, the abrasion is here, as I'm indicating with my finger.
Now, is there a difference between an abrasion and a laceration?
Well, abrasion is just the surface of the skin being broken. A laceration is a tear of the skin, but it would be deeper.
Now, did you find any evidence of a gunshot wound?
I did.
What were your observations?
Well, first of all, bullet fragments were visible in the x-rays taken prior at the period before the autopsy and were reviewed. And then direct examination externally of the mouth showed bruising of her lips, blood present inside the oral cavity. And then as a part of the autopsy, internal dissections are made, the chest, abdomen, head, and neck. And the neck structures are looked at in place and then are dissected and removed and further examined. There was gunshot wound with damage passing through her tongue. The bullet had gone posteriorly or backward, causing a gaping defect in the back of her throat, the pharynx, and then the bullet had broken in pieces, but the main portion had gone through her spinal column, the cervical spine, and transected the spinal cord. The bullet fragments had stayed in the body and then were able to be seen and recovered by the dissection of the neck from the front and dissection of the neck from the back. There was hemorrhage in the tissues surrounding and blood that was pooled in the throat, the mouth, and the nasal passages around the tongue and pharyngeal or throat defects.
Was there any fouling?
Yes.
What is fouling?
Fouling is the soot deposits from a firearm. And when a firearm is discharged, the cartridge contains primer residue. The firing pin hits the cartridge. That residue ignites the gunpowder. The gunpowder burns very rapidly, but not completely. The hot expanding gas propels the bullet out of the cartridge, down the barrel, and out of the muzzle.
I'm going to object at this point, lack of foundation for this answer beyond the scope of his expertise.
Response?
Your Honor, he's testified in thousands of homicide cases, a lot of them dealing with gunshots. I think there's adequate foundation based upon his training experience on this.
Well, why did you ask about that for the foundation?
Are you familiar with the operation of firearms?
Yes, that was part of my training during my forensic pathology fellowship, including test firing of weapons. And I've worked with firearms examiners in multiple agencies, also test firing weapons.
Permission to continue.
Okay.
Can you continue to explain what fouling is?
So fouling is the soot or smoke that comes out of the muzzle of the weapon along with the bullet. And if the muzzle is close enough to the skin or the inside of the mouth, in this case, it deposits on the tissue and shows a dark discoloration. You can actually see the gunshot residue with the naked eye and confirm it under the microscope.
You mentioned there was damage to the tongue.
Yes.
Now, it may seem like a simple question, but is the tongue a muscle?
Yes.
What happens to muscles when a person passes?
They relax and just stay in whatever position unless external forces or gravity changes it.
Was there anything significant about your examination of the tongue?
Well, I saw the bruising of the lips. There was a fracture.
We do have to step aside for a break. Dr. Howard, they're talking about the tongue. The other state experts say that damage to the tongue showed a different trajectory, that this could not have been a suicide because it was downward in nature, not upward. We'll see if Dr. Howard speaks to that. Let's get that break and get you back into that courtroom. Welcome back to Court TV Live. We are in a verdict watch in Michigan for the trial for school shooter dad James Crumbley. The jury has been deliberating for 4 hours and 58 minutes, almost 5 hours. Once we see any movement in that courtroom, we'll go there live. We haven't gotten any questions from them yet. They've been pretty quiet. Meanwhile, back to Idaho, where we're watching the defense case underway this afternoon in the jealous ex-trooper murder trial. The defendant is Dan Howard. On the stand now is the former medical examiner for the county where this happened, Dr. John Howard. His opinion on the case was different than what the prosecution is presenting to the jury. So the defense called him as their expert witness. Let's listen to what he has to say, still on the stand under direct.
A bullet passes through tissue. There's kinetic energy converted to the mechanical and hydrostatic.
Non-responsive.
It's not typically your objection, but I will sustain that. That's not responsive to the question that you asked.
What was significant about the anything? What was the damage to the tongue?
The bullet had passed through the tongue, tearing the tissue apart.
Was it from the tip or top or bottom? What part?
It passed from near the front towards the back.
Now, you did a neck dissection in this case,
Yes,
and that was from the rear?
front and rear.
Okay. When you do a neck dissection from the rear, what do you have to do?
First, you turn the body over so it's initially in a supine or resting on its back, place it in a prone position, cleanse the body so that you can do a thorough external examination of the head and neck, and then proceed with surgical incisions in the back of the neck.
While a person is, while a body is on, rolled over, what happens with the blood?
Well, any blood that's in the nose and mouth will purge out, and in terms of blood that's still in the blood vessels, under gravity will start to shift towards the front of the body from the back.
Did you examine the head?
Yes.
What does that entail?
First, you carefully examine and palpate the scalp. Then a scalpel is used to make an incision, as I'm indicating on my head, across the scalp above the ears. The scalp is then reflected forward and backward so that the deep layers of the scalp can be directly examined. You cut through the tissue to do that. Then the outer surface of the skull can be directly examined.
Showing you what's been admitted as 20M.
Can I see it? Are you sure?
It's admitted.
Okay, can I still see it?
You see this photo?
Yes.
And does that cause pressure, or what are you looking for when you do that? Why do you do that in a case like this?
So the deep layers of the scalp, the muscles that are applied to the head, and the skull surface itself can be directly seen and therefore directly examined.
Okay. You see these two marks at the bottom there?
Objection beyond the scope of the court's prior rulings.
Please explain his autopsy.
Counsel is about to ask for an opinion on something that is not contained in Dr. Howard's original report.
There you are. Maybe we approach it.
Yeah.
All right, a sidebar. So everyone's going to take a bit of a break. The jury won't be able to hear what they are talking about. They're actually going to be sent out of the courtroom while they deliberate this. Let's bring back in National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar, who is standing by. Michael, here's some details on what has been brewing between the state and the defense over this witness. The state has claimed that Dr. John Howard and the defense had communication leading up to this trial that they were unaware of. They say that he was shown photos. They had, I guess, these meetings where they gave or received an opinion from Dr. Howard that wasn't on the books, wasn't something that was turned over in discovery to the state. So they tried to get him excluded all the way up until just a couple of hours ago. They asked this judge to exclude John Howard from testifying, saying it was prejudicial to the state. Judge denied it and is coming in. He said he may consider some sanctions for the defense for not handling discovery right. But I was wondering if you can just generally talk about discovery. I mean, we're watching and just want the truth out of this trial. So no matter what he's going to say, we want to hear his expertise on it, but they have to let the state know about that expertise beforehand, correct?
100%. They absolutely have every they have the liability to notify the state of any single witness and what that witness is going to pretend and what they're going to say. They absolutely are required to do it. I know what they're doing for their client, and they're this is zealous advocacy, but there are rules and they have to abide by the rules. So I agree that it should have came in, because the consequence shouldn't be that hypothetically an innocent man goes to jail for the rest of his life because an attorney did not notify the state. But I do agree with the state. They should be upset, and the defense attorneys, I mean, what harm could have happened to their clients if they would have told the prosecution, here's the witness we're bringing in, the expert? The state couldn't have said no. The state would have had no ability to say no. But one more thing, Julia, I hate when prosecutions say you can't meet with a witness, you can't, because they do that all the time. So that part of it I don't agree with.
I think they're more objecting to not knowing about it. That seems to be the case. Let's actually go in. They're arguing about it now. The jury, not in the courtroom.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the question that the state anticipated, and in conferring with Mr. Johnson at the bench, seems to be an accurate prediction. Mr. Johnson is now going to be showing Dr. Howard things that were not noted by Dr. Howard in his autopsy report and asking for his opinion as to what those are. That is new information. That is new opinions. Those are the types of questions that would have been discovered in an expert report. The entire containment that was articulated by this court was that Dr. Howard was going to testify to the opinions contained within this report. One of those opinions is to cause of death. However, he is here testifying as a medical expert and being asked medical expert opinions such as, what is this? Is this part of the autopsy, or is this some kind of blunt force trauma? He's going to be asked, is this a contusion or is this lividity? If those are not specifically articulated in the report, then they are new opinions, Judge.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Your Honor. I do not plan on asking about any contusions, if it's a contusion or not. The lividity, I was not going to ask him specific photos, if they're lividity or not. What I was simply wanting him to do, which he does have in his opinion, that transection that had, or the examination of the head and neck, and I was asking him what those are. That's, if the court wants, I can move on. But
What did you anticipate the answer to be?
I anticipated the answer that is not that is the normal process of peeling back the scalp and part of the incisions that would be made or hemorrhages that would be obtained at that time. I'm not asking of him anything about contusions. Those are in his report. I'm assuming if I did ask him, he would be consistent with his report.
Dr. Howard, just so I understand, what would your answer have been?
What the photograph shows is the undersurface of the scalp, where it's